and welcome to another episode of the Cutting Edge Figure Skating Podcast. My name is Kim Dunaway, and in this episode, I will be previewing the ice dance event at the upcoming 2024 World Figure Skating Championships. Ice dance, to me, always presents the potential for excitement and chaos, and it always ends up being a big fat zero. It always ends up being, unfortunately, the most predictable of the four disciplines. However, I'm not convinced that this season that's necessarily going to be the case. Madi and Evan come in as the favorites because they've won everything this season, and they've been undefeated since January of 2023. They won 4 continents, and they won Worlds. They won World Team Trophy, all going away, and then this season they've been undefeated. The only glitch has been at U.S. Nationals when they were both sick, and they lost the free skate to Carrera and Podmarenko, but had a big enough lead to still win the title. The question becomes, with them skipping out on 4 continents due to illness, have they lost any momentum going into this championships? And there's no reason to think that they have, even though if you look at last season, Gillis and Poirier missed 4 continents after winning everything that season and then ended up third at the World Championships. But I think Gillis and Poirier lost a lot more training time, obviously had a lot more that they were dealing with Piper's cancer diagnosis. And I think, too, in the issue with Gillis and Poirier winning 4 continents this year, you could definitely see the room at the top in those scores for another team or 2 or even 3 to be ahead of that. So Madi and Evan, in my estimation, still come in as the favorites. That being said, I'm not convinced that they're going to repeat as world champions. And it's not because I don't think they have 2 really good programs for them this season, and I think that they do. It's because we have seen them in situations so many times make mistakes when it really counted. And last season, of course, they famously fell during their free skate. And fortunately for them, it was in between elements. It only cost them a point and some points on their second mark, small amount of points. And so they were able to still win, especially with a lead that they had after the rhythm dance. This season, I don't think that they're going to be able to get away with a mistake. And it's hard for me to see them skating 2 really powerful, clean programs. And I don't know if that comes from a lack of faith, but I just feel like I've seen so many times at the Olympics, both of the last 2 Olympics that they've been at, making errors that cost them potential for winning a medal. I think about the 2021 Nationals and World Championships were really set up for them to do very well, and made errors in both of those competitions. And so I just feel like coming into them, they're almost due for an error. They've won so much that I just don't have the confidence that they're going to be able to skate 2 clean programs. I think now again, they come in as favorites because I think if they do skate 2 clean programs, they absolutely win the world title. I think of the 3, and we're talking about Guinard and Fabry, Gillis and Poirier, they definitely, to me, have the strongest rhythm dance. I think Gillis and Poirier have a very fun and entertaining rhythm dance, and I think Guinard and Fabry do too, but I think both of them have just a little bit to be desired in those programs versus Madi and Evan, who, in my estimation, have the stronger rhythm dance. Now, when you get to the free dance, I think all 3 of them have really strong, stunning free dances. But what we see so often with ice dance is that there's not a lot of movement amongst these top teams after the rhythm dance. And so who comes out there and skates the best rhythm dance oftentimes it's kind of going to stay that way. So if Madi and Evan go out there and skate really strong in their rhythm dance, that certainly will give them the edge going into the free dance, provided that they can skate well, which again, like I said, not sure if they will, but I think that they definitely have the 2 powerhouse programs for them that could put them ahead and give them a second world title. I'm looking at the Italians real strong here because while I don't think that they have the best rhythm dance of the top 3, they always skate really well. They are so consistent. I don't know when's the last time we saw Charlene and Marco make an error. Yes, they lost the season to the Brits, but that was with them skating two clean programs. There were no errors in either of those two programs. And you think about last season, like they have just been just so incredibly strong. Even in their step sequences and twizzles, like these two just don't make a mistake. And when I look at the top three teams, like who is my confidence level the highest in that they could go out and perform two top tier programs to the best of their abilities? It is Charlene and Marco. And I think that to me, they come in as a real dark horse to potentially take away a title from two North American teams who you would expect to be vying for this title, just on how incredibly strong that they have been all season. We'll see. I think it will really determine on how close they can get in the rhythm dance. Obviously, they're coming off of another win at Europeans. And with the Brits making some mistakes there, no real competition for them. Again, they've never beat Madi and Evan at a major competition that I can recall, and pretty sure that they haven't. I feel like I went and looked at that last year coming into the Grand Prix final in 2022. So it would be a huge, massive step forward for them to be able to do it. But like I said, I just feel like I come in with so much more confidence with them and their ability to execute at a high level than I do with the other two North American teams who are contending for a title here. So if I switch gears and talk about Piper and Paul, to me, there has been room left at the top of their scores in both of their past two competitions. 4 continents, which they won, and at the Grand Prix final. So I'm just not sure what we're going to get with them here. I think they have a very strong free dance. But is it the type of free dance that's going to move them ahead of people if they're behind? I'm just not sure that it is. If they could go out and skate bangers in their rhythm dance and get ahead of everybody else, I think they could stay there. But I'm just not sure that that's the case. For me, they have the most potential to get leveled down in things like their step sequences, especially in the rhythm dance, and Piper's twizzles at times have been a little iffy in the rhythm dance as well. And so to me, I have them third in my sort of rankings in my head coming into who I think is going to win. But I also, even in a home world, when you would think that they would be prized to win the title, I would be more surprised if they won than I would be surprised if they were off the podium altogether. Just because I feel like if Lila and Lewis come out and skate balls to the wall like they can, like we saw them at NHK Trophy, I think they can beat Piper and Paul in the free skate. We have seen where they have a free skate, whether you like Rocky or not, that can propel them in the standings. Where I feel like a lot of these other ones, they're just going to kind of hang out wherever they are. They're a team that has scored 130 points in the free skate. And if Piper and Paul come out there and score 128 like they have been, they could find themselves in 4th, which is crazy, right? To think of a Canadian team that could be vying for a title to finish 4th, but they could also win, right? Like Piper and Paul could also come in and win the whole shebang. Now, again, it will require what we haven't seen in Ice Dance, which is a lot more chaos, which I'm open to. We haven't seen Piper and Paul beat Guinard and Fabry or Chalk and Bates in over a year, but we know that they can, and they have. I think, again, like I said, I feel like a lot for them is going to come down to that rhythm dance. And for Lila and Lewis, coming off of that win at New NHK Trophy, coming into Grand Prix final, and then immediately making mistakes on their twizzles in the rhythm dance and took them completely out of contention for a medal there. They've had an issue on a dance spin in their free dance a couple of times this season, which has affected their scores. It did it again at Europeans. If they can clean some of those things up and go out and skate really strong in the rhythm dance, I think they have the potential to upset the apple cart and get on the podium here. And I would expect it to be more at the expense of Piper and Paul than I would expect it to be at the expense of Gwinnard and Fabry, even though they've beaten them this season. We haven't seen them beat Piper and Paul, but we'll see. I hope that it's not just predictable status quo, that there's at least some, even if it's not some movement, that we at least get some suspense, you know? But that's the top four. I don't think anybody else is going to be on that podium besides one of those four teams. I don't think anybody is winning outside of Piper and Paul, Gwinnard and Fabry, or Chalk and Bates. But if we're going to talk about the next group of contenders, then we're talking about the two Canadian teams of Fonio Baudry and Nikolai Sorensen and Lejeune Legas. So we talk about Lolo and Nick first. What's the reaction to this team going to be? I don't think a lot of your casual skating fans know anything about the Safe Sport report. You know, is there going to be a lukewarm response? Are there going to be any boos? Are they going to be very supportive of the team because they're a Canadian team? That's going to be a real interesting thing to see. There were some media reports that were coming out from a Canadian readiness event that they had a couple weeks ago. And a lot of very remarks as if nothing was really going on coming out of Laurence and Nikolai. It'll be interesting to see what the remarks are at Worlds, who's pressing them. We'll see. We'll see what exactly happens with them. Ordinarily, you would have them sort of firmly in that fifth place spot. We haven't seen them really contend or really push the top four at any point this season. I think that they're much more in danger of getting passed by Marjorie and Zach than they are to pass anybody ahead of them. I think the only thing that might keep them ahead of Marjorie and Zach is the fact that they have not been on the ice as long, because we know Marjorie had a concussion. They were out of Canadian Nationals in 4 continents. They were originally scheduled to compete at Challenge Cup back in February and pulled out of that event also. They have been on the ice for about a month, I believe now. They are here in Montreal, as if I'm in Montreal. I'm not in Montreal. They are in Montreal ready to compete there. So, you know, how did that lack of training time affect them? You know, they had some issues going into the season with Zach's shoulder. So both of them have lost training time this season for different reasons. They have 2 really fantastic programs. And it was also bummed for them at Grand Prix final that we didn't see the best that they have to offer either. The judges have definitely been quicker to mark them down when they haven't been at their best, but they have also rewarded them when they have skated well. So they're a team that I could be pushing to be in that last group in that top 5, but at worst for me, you know, should be top 6 or 7. That next group is going to be a real strong contingent from Europe, and that's going to be Reed and Ambrew Levicius, hot off of their bronze medal at Europeans, Turkula and First Lewis, who are bronze medalists at Europeans last year and have, unfortunately for them, just not scored as high as they would have liked. Just had a lot of level issues this season, but they do have really 2 fantastic programs. We've also got the Tashlers, who have also battled injuries this season, and we have not seen them as much as we would have liked to, but at times this season have just been really, really strong. And then you've got Carrera and Ponomarenko, who have 2 of the best programs of their careers, who are the next highest American team that are going to be here. They were 10th place at last year's Worlds. I think a lot of the European teams that were just right there last year are even stronger than they were. I think it's going to be a battle for them to be able to get in the top 10 again this season, even with the 2 really strong programs that they have. And then you've got a lot of teams that are just kind of right there with them, or just right behind. You've got Davis and Smolkin from Georgia. You've got the 2 young teams of Lemon Kwan and the Morazcheks. You've got Desmogets and Lemercier from France, and you've got Brody and Somerville from the United States. And then you've also got Lopareva and Bruzeau from France, who I forgot, who is sort of in that group with Reed and Ambrulevicius and Turkula and Verst Lewis and the Tashlers. So, I mean, again, this is going to be another really, really tough event. You've got 36 teams, only 20 are going to make the free skate. So you've also got teams like Smart and Deke and Orihara and Pirinen and Harris and Chan and Komatsubara and Coletta, who just came off of the best scores of their career at Four Continents. And, you know, a lot of good teams not going to make the free dance. I mean, it's just unfortunately how it is. We did have one withdrawal. Wang and Liu were replaced by Ching and Xing, and so they're likely not to make the free dance. So, likely not to even potentially qualify a team for China next year. So, okay, let's walk through some of these other European teams that are here, and then I'll talk about the American teams. So, Reed and Ambrulevicius and Lopareva and Bruzeau have really been the other two teams that have done the best this season, getting bronze medals on the Grand Prix. They've been just ahead of what we've seen scoring be like for the Davis and Smolkins of the world and the Tashlers and even Turkula and Verst Lewis at times. And I think that those four teams are probably likely to round out the top 10. So that's why I say it's hard for Carrera and Ponomarenko to finish in the top 10 again, because you've got these teams that are really strong right ahead of them. You've got Reed and Ambrulevicius, who have scored 80 this season in the rhythm dance, and none of these other teams that I've talked about here in this next group have been able to do that. They've also been able to score 120 in their free dance this year, and none of the other teams have been able to do that this season. We have seen Turkula and Verst Lewis do that last season, but not this season. And so, you know, what's going to be that benchmark? I think they're kind of in that same position that we saw Green and Parsons in last year. The teams that can get, you know, like 120 in their free dance and score 80 or close to 80 are going to be the teams that are right behind that group of 5 or 6 that are kind of firmly at the top when we talk about the top 4 plus the other 2 Canadian teams. Who's going to be those next few teams? And so you're looking at as close to 80 as they can get in that rhythm dance and as close to 120 as they can get in that free dance. And so I look at a team like Christine and Anthony, and they just really haven't been able to get anywhere near 120 points in their free dance. Now, perhaps coming in as silver medalist for the U.S. gives them a little bit of a bump. I don't know. But I think it's tough for me to see some of these teams jumping over some of these other European teams in absence of errors, which can happen. Last year, Turkula and Verst Lewis made some mistakes in their free dance that caused them to go down a little bit. The Tashlers had a really strong free dance, caused them to go up. Lopareva and Bruzeau had a fall in their free dance, and that caused them to go down. So this is this section where you start to see some movement. You don't necessarily see, you know, if you were 8th in the rhythm dance, that you're also 8th in the free dance. A lot of times, this is where you're going to start to see some movement amongst these teams. And then once you get out of the top 10 and you start talking about Davis and Smolkin and Desmogets and Lemercier and the Mraz checks, boy, it's going to come down to levels on twizzles and levels on step sequences, more so than it might even be on a PCS mark, because it can make the difference between a team finishing 12th and a team finishing 19th here. And that could be a big deal for some of these teams that are trying to qualify for 2 spots. So I think that, you know, the United States should be in pretty good shape. I mean, if Chalk and Bates win, then Christina and Anthony would need to be 12th or higher, which I think they can absolutely do. If you had a situation where Chalk and Bates finished 3rd, well, then you might have a problem, because then Christina and Anthony would need to finish 10th in order for the U.S. to keep 3 spots. And they've had 3 spots for a very, very long time. So there's definitely some pressure on both of those teams to really do well, or they could risk losing that spot. If Christina and Anthony had, you know, some kind of a disaster, then that could be in real jeopardy. for a team like the Tashlers, they, and the Czechs, they should be in good shape between the two of them to still get those two spots, because whereas last year you needed the Tashlers to finish in the top 10 for that to happen, this year they just need both of their teams to finish with 28 points in order to get two teams next year, which means the Tashlers could be 10th, the Czechs could be 18th, and they would be okay. Where you would run into trouble is if, the Czechs had some kind of issue in their rhythm dance and they ended up not making the free skate. Well, then that might be a bit of an issue. Then the Tashlers finish 11th, and then that might be an issue. But I think in general they should be in pretty good shape. Loprever and Brissot, Desmogés and Lemercier should absolutely be able to get two teams for France again next year. A team like Davis and Smolkin, you have a team like Kozakova and Revia who are at home, who are a very, very good team. So as much as you would, a lot of teams have a hard time rooting for Davis and Smolkin. If you wanted for Georgia to get two teams next year, you would need Davis and Smolkin to finish in the top 10, which, again, based on what we saw for Europeans, I don't see that happening. I don't see them leapfrogging a number of these teams in order to get there. So I think that is going to be a bit of a tough go. Where do teams like Lemon Kwan and Brody and Somerville land? They have scored Lemon Kwan have scored sort of vastly different sort of all season. They have at times, in something like Warsaw Cup where they didn't have a lot of competition, gotten really, really high scores. But then somewhere like Four Consonants scored a bit lower when there's a lot more teams of higher quality that are there. I think for Lemon Kwan, their free dance has been their better scoring vehicle this season. And so they might be a team that you might see be 15th in the rhythm dance. You'd be like, oh my gosh, well, that free skate might shoot them up to 12th or something like that. You might see some movement like that with them. The Czechs are a team that's sort of almost been the opposite of Lemon Kwan. We have seen them score very high, almost what the Tashlers get, like 75 points in the rhythm dance, and then make mistakes in the free dance a lot of times this season and then get pushed down quite a bit. So that's definitely something to look for. And then with Brody and Somerville, I think they're very close to what we have seen Desmogés and Lemercier score, but just kind of a notch below. Can they capitalize on how well they skated at nationals and sort of, get close to this group that's going to be right outside of the top 10? I think that's going to be really interesting for them. And then a team like, Olivia Smart and Tim Deek, who originally weren't even named to the World Championship team, who got named later, they have, for them, a much stronger rhythm dance, which will help them than their free dance, because I think that will help them, allow them to get into the free dance to begin with, whereas if it was flip-flopped around, they might be in danger of not even making the free dance. But it requires them to skate well. It's going to require all of these teams to skate well. And then at the last couple of competitions that we saw, the Egna Dance Trophy as well as Challenge Cup, there were a lot of exclamation points on the character step. And so is that something that's going to carry over into this particular event? They're really going to be hammering down if these couples are close enough in that particular element, or could we possibly see, people losing podium spots, top 10 spots because of something like that. So that's something to really hammer on. What's the tech caller going to be like? Because that can make the difference between who wins, who loses, who's in the top 10, who's out of the top 10, who makes the free dance, who doesn't, just based upon a tech call. Because as I said, once you get down to, these teams that are, 8th place down to 20th place, that's where you're really going to see a lot of movement. And that's where you're really going to see those elements really make a difference in terms of their technical levels. Whereas with the higher teams, where you really see the difference in is on grade of execution and on their program components. So, predictions. So I just said, that I am am very much questioning whether or not I feel like Madi and Evan are going to go out and skate 2 clean programs. And am I really going to sit here on my podcast and predict that the European champions are going to win Worlds? You know, can Piper and Paul win Worlds? I just can't see it based on what we've seen this season. I think they're the sentimental favorites, but I don't know. I'm going to go out on the limb and I'm just going to go nuts. Who cares? It's, I just feel like the Italians are going to be the cleanest team here. So I'm going to go on a limb and I'm going to say that they pull an upset and they win a world title here, and that Madi and Evan end up second. And I'm going to say Piper Gillis and Paul Poirier. It's hard for me to see them not on the podium. It really is. But I just keep thinking about the Brits and the Rocky program, and I think they could sneak up on there. I don't know. I feel like I'm hyping this up in my mind to be more exciting than it really is going to be. But we're going to go with just total chaos. We're going to go with total chaos. And I'm going to say the Italians, the Americans, the Brits for third, and Gillis and Poirier get shut out in their home country in fourth. Watch them win the whole thing. Who knows? But that's what I'm going to go with. All right. So that's my preview for the dance competition, which, who knows? Who knows? I'm always hoping for chaos. So I'm going to predict chaos. I'm just going to put that in the water. All right. Not that I'm not rooting for Madi and Evan. I don't know. Maybe I feel like I'm going to jinx them or something. Okay. I'm just rambling at this point. Thank you as always so much for listening to the podcast. And I can't wait to actually cover the event, see what happens. I will be here for all the recaps. Hope you have a good rest of your week. I hope you're able to watch as much skating this week as possible. I'll be back with one more preview for Worlds, and that is the ladies. Until then, have a great rest of your week.